Welcome to lesson number 3. The title of this lecture is The Bible Describes God. Today's question is, how does the Bible describe God? On the right, you have a picture of Aaron Rodgers. When I think of Aaron Rodgers, there are a few things that I can think of to describe him. He's a very gifted athlete. He must work very hard. He seems like he has a lot of fun with his job. The problem is, I don't know Aaron Rodgers personally. I've never met him. These are just things that I've gathered by watching him or I've heard while reading about him. If you take the person that you see on the left, you see a picture of my wife. I know my wife a lot better than I know Aaron Rodgers. The reason that I know my wife better is because I've spent time with her. I've talked to her. I've got to be around her. All of these things mean that, thankfully, I know my wife better than I know Aaron Rodgers. The Bible tells us that God is one and that He is triune. The Bible tells us many more things about God so that we may know Him better, and our faith and trust will grow even stronger. Today we're going to look at some of those characteristics that describe God. There are a few church words that we use to describe God, and I'd like to share those with you. The first one is omnipresent. That means that God is everywhere. A good way to remember this is by looking at the end of the word. Present means that God is here. God is everywhere. The second omni is omnipotent, which means that God is all-powerful. And the third omni is omniscient, which means God is all-knowing. These three words give us a good description of our God. Omnipresent, God is everywhere. Omnipotent, God is all-powerful. And omniscient, God is all-knowing. We get to today's takeaway. The first takeaway is God is a spirit who exists eternally. That phrase says a few things about God. The first truth we can find about God is John chapter 4, verse 24. Here, John writes down for us the words of Jesus. God is spirit, and His worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. That's why we're not able to see God. God is a spirit. The next line tells us that He exists eternally, and the Bible gives us an awesome proof of that as well. In Psalm chapter 90, verse 2, the psalmist writes, "Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." That passage tells us that God has existed forever, that He is everlasting. He has no beginning, and He has no end. And lastly, I'd like to share with you a passage of extreme comfort. It's found in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 27. Here Moses writes, "The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will drive out your enemy before you, saying, 'Destroy him.'" That passage tells us that God is our refuge and that He works for our good. It shows us His omnipotence or His power. So we don't see God because He's a spirit, and God has existed forever and will continue to exist. Our next main point tells us more about who God is. God is all-present. He's almighty, all-knowing, holy, faithful, merciful, and gracious. That tells us a lot about our God. God is all-present. Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 24 shows us that truth. "Can anyone hide in secret places so that I cannot see him, declares the Lord? Do not I fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord?" There are lots of people in the Bible who have tried to hide from God. Jonah is an example. Adam and Eve are another example. How foolish it is. We know that God is all present, or like we said before, omnipresent. We also know that our God is almighty. We can simply look at the works that he has done. He created the world with his words. He performed countless miracles while he was here on this earth. There is nothing that our God cannot do. He's omnipotent or almighty. He's all-knowing. He's omniscient. He knows everything that we ever think. He knows it all. We also know that our God is holy. That means he's perfect, innocent. He's never done anything wrong. We know that our God is faithful. He keeps his promises. He never goes against them. We know that our God is merciful. He does not treat us as our sins deserve. And we also know that our God is gracious. We know that he's gracious because he sent his only son, Jesus, to die on the cross for our sins. It's important to remember that our God is complex. We can't look at him and describe him with only one of these characteristics, but all of them go together to form who our God is. Today's key passages are Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 24, John chapter 4, verse 24, and Psalm chapter 90, verse 2.